To start by just saying that I wasn't your closing keynote. That I'm very, very humbled to have been asked to come up and help send everyone home in a good way. And your original closing keynote person wasn't able to make it last minute, and Kyla asked if there was anything I could do to help, and gladly jumped at the chance to come and share this space with some people that have stepped up and agreed to share some stories that have inspired me to do the work that I do, not only through comedy, but through digital media and filmmaking. So, is this the clicker here? So, I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the work that I do and share with you some perspective that I think is valuable in terms of the way I am going about using the land as our inspiration for embracing modern day tools. And it might fly in the face of some of the things that many of you think, but I'm just going to ask for your patience until I get through the entire presentation before you chase me out of here with my hippy-dippy ideas and my embracing of iPads and the internet. So this is Digital Media Bush Tea and Dabad Jimawanan. Dabad Jimawanan in Anishinaabemowin is our story, or our word for story or storytelling. And the act, in these days, the act of storytelling is a political act. It's overtly political when you share and tell stories to young people to fill the hole that colonialism has left us with. And that's what I want to start with today, is just to reinforce what we already know, that over the last couple hundred years in this country, a number has been done to our people. And it's inarguable now at this point, thanks to the work of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the work that the TRC has given us. We now well know what has gone on in this country. But the truth is when I travel around and talk with people and meet with people, they think there's still some debate as to how bad it really was. And just last week, Senator Lynn Bayak, who's originally from Treaty 3 in my territory, said, you know, we should be talking about the positives of residential school and not just the negatives. It's a real shame Marie Wilson and Commissioner Littlechild and Murray St. Clair didn't highlight all the good that came from this. And what is shocking, not only about her feeling free enough to say that in this country in 2017, what is shocking is that we know that those comments come from somewhere, that she has had that conversation with someone around a dinner table, maybe in a staff meeting, maybe on a plane, but that this ingrained idea that things weren't as bad as we said they were is rampant in this country. And I want to acknowledge the fact that we have come a long way in a short amount of time. So never lose perspective on the fact that it's an actual miracle that we are still here. It's a miracle. It is a miracle that the elders sitting in this room, through the horrifying experiences that many of them have survived through residential school and other means, have found it in their hearts and in their minds to continue to show love, to express love, and to show us how good life can be. It's a miracle. And what can only be described as the most cowardly act imaginable, taking children out of a community and bringing them somewhere else, that our old people have managed to find love in their heart and a good place in their mind to be able to express what life is all about for us, whether you are Anishinaabe or Dene. That no matter where we find ourselves today, always be reminded of the miracle it is that we are still here. And it is through those expressions of love from our ancestors and our elders the reason why we are able to sit here and gather today. And I always start by acknowledging our elders and our ancestors because it's the reason why we're able to gather. The second thing I'd like to say and highlight is something that has come up time and time again here throughout the week, is that this is just part of who we are. This is just part of what we do. And I'll agree with you up to a point, but I'll also disagree with you. Because there are some that certainly were raised on the land, some that certainly have the skills and the knowledge to survive overnight in the bush or over a week in the bush. But please remember those that don't have that same privilege. And please remember those that weren't raised that way. Please remember those that watch the boats or the skidoos leave the community every time they do, and they wish they could go. But not all of us come from these families. Not all of us have that privilege. So to have any traditional knowledge, based on what we've been through in the last couple of 100 years in this country, we are privileged to have this knowledge and very lucky. And that's why we respect the land as much as we do. That's why we respect our knowledge systems as much as we do, our governance, our laws. That's why they are as strong as they are, because you carry them. And they are inherently in those that don't carry them as well. So don't take for granted the work that you did here. It's amazing. It's incredible, deeply rooted work that is ongoing for generations and generations. But always remember those that are not in this room. Remember those that you are trying to program for. There was a bit of an argument in the tent this week that I was in about the word on the land program. And boy, someone, I'm not going to point them out. They're to my left. But I'm not going to point them out. Wearing a black shirt. Then to my left. Possibly in the second or third row. No, I'm just kidding. But they said, I don't want to call it that. I don't want to call it on the land program. I want to call it on the land life. And I thought, yeah, that's right. This is our life, right? However, for some, that's not true. We have to continue to make space. And I know I'm in a room full of people that are making space, but I want you to leave with that reminder, is to continue to make space for those that maybe don't have the opportunities that so many of us do. Because it is those, ultimately, at the end of the day, that we need to help, that we are emboldened to help, through this work. And it's the rewards that we will gain and get through helping those that don't have that makes this work worth it and possible. This is a quote from my favorite author, Basil Johnston, an Anishinaabe writer and philosopher, and someone that worked with the language, and he said, traditionally we were a contemporary peoples. And I just love that idea of Indigenous people picking up the tools of the day. And the tools of the day continue to change through time, and we know that over the last couple hundred years there have been many tools, and I just love the idea of Indigenous people looking around at the tools around them going like, well, what's that? What's that? What does that do? What does that do? And like, well, that's a knife. What's it for? It's to stab the white guys trying to steal our women. It's like, all right, that works. I like that tool. I pick on white guys. Don't worry about it. You're going to go back to your homes and you'll be fine. It's just a joke, but I just love the idea that through time, this is how Indigenous people have always lived, is to embrace the technology and the tools of the day. We just watched a presentation about the kayak, and that's a technology. I love that slide. You said it is a form of technology. It is a way that enhanced our lives. It's a way that made life better. And so these tools that we have today, and what I try to do with land-based programming and storytelling and digital media, is embrace the tools that are in front of us to make young people excited about being who they are. And that's not to say that I want to make apps and games and websites and fancy tools like that so the kids stay inside. No, that would be counterintuitive and silly, but that these apps and this technology becomes a doorway into who they are. It becomes a doorway. Much like powwow, where I come from. Powwow is not everyone powwows. Not everyone comes from a family of beadworkers or powwow singers or dancers. But when you find your way to the powwow, most of us do, it is a doorway that you walk through, and when you walk through that doorway, you're introduced to people that go to sweats. You're introduced to people that speak their language. You're introduced to teachers and all of these gifted people that introduce you to other doorways, and you just continue to walk through these really beautiful, profound doorways through life. And that's, for me, what technology is. That's what we're trying to do with our project, Stories from the Land, is just try to innovate around the space of storytelling and programming to bring everyone with us forever. Because that's what our innovation has done through time. Indigenous innovation brings everyone with you. It doesn't leave anyone behind. Everyone comes with you forever. What I love about the internet so far, that's forever. So your Facebook status is, I hate my boss. That's on the internet forever. 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 So stop Facebook poking each other. It's dangerous. This is a George Orwell quote from his book 1984. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. What I like about this first, and I dislike it, I rewrote it. But what I like about this is it's the idea that you have to know what is behind you in order to know what's in front of you. And we have a word in our language, Biskabiang, that speaks to that concept. You have to be informed by what's back there in order to go forward. That's not to be stuck looking back here, but that is to know who you are, where you came from, to acknowledge those things in order to continue to move forward. So I like that idea that he who understands the past controls the future. So if we understand what happened back here and we can come to grips with our collective past or our individual past and go through healing and forgiveness, if we understand that, we're able to go forward. We'll be free to do so. But what I rewrote is I added a line. I took out he, because it's always he. Why is it always he? Let's stop with the he. They who control the past controls the future. They who control the present controls the past. And the line I added, they who control the future understand their past and are present. What I'm trying to say there is, as long as we sit in the same room together, as long as we find ways to come together as a community in order to heal and endeavor on this path of wellness and health by being informed of where we've been and what we've gone through, but looking forward to a better day, looking forward to a future, we'll be okay. And I see a room full of people that are focused on just this, is we're going to be okay. And you obviously have a heart and a mind that is focused on bringing your people with you in this way. This is a community mapping project. It's a piece of a map that we did in a community in James Bay. And what we did is we drew, through our Stories from the Land process, we drew their community. And we said, okay, so where's the church? Put it on the map. And where's your house? Put it on the map. And where's the boat landing? Put it on the map. And we started adding these little circles. And the big, thick brown piece on the bottom, that's the lakefront. And all of these little circles represent stories that we gathered through a week-long workshop process. And all these little stories represent these communities' history. And at the beginning, when we said, who are you? What does it mean to come from Pitabik, Fort Albany? Well, I don't know. Well, tell me a story I don't know a story. Well, tell me, where did you grow up? Right here. All right. Tell me about this place. I don't know. And slowly we started to work together, and all of these amazing stories started to emerge. The community's history started to emerge. Much of the history, the youth in the community did not know. So do not take your knowledge for granted. Do not take your experiences and the gifts that you carry for granted, because our young people are depending on your history, your knowledge. They're counting on it. And it's not enough to say, well, they don't know their language, they don't speak their... We're waiting. They're waiting. This is something that my former chief at Couchiching First Nation, she wrote her dissertation work on this concept, Manituaki and Akanagewin. And And when you translate these words, they loosely and roughly translate Manitou, spirit, Aki, land, and Inakanagewin is a law concept, but it's about relationality. It's about how we as Anishinaabe relate to all things around us, all living things, all things that we encounter in our lives, spirit, land, and law. And with Manitou, Aki, and Inakanagewin, one of the things that we talk about with youth and with young people that we work with is the idea of living with these three things hand in hand, that you are of spirit, you were born, given spirit, that the land you are the land, that the minerals in your blood are the same minerals that they're trying to mine out of the land, that the water that composes your body is the same water you drink, that you return to the land when this physical earth walk is over, that it's inseparable, that we are the land. And the law, the way we relate to all of creation, is relevant to our lives because when you take care of the land takes care of you. And I don't have to go too far into that. We all know this here in this room. But that when you live in good relationship to the land, you are rewarded. And I'll use a story of a friend of mine from my home community. Her name is, she's an academic at Lakehead University, Jana Ray Yerksa. Her family works with wild rice in our community. But there was a long time, decades, in our community where there was no wild rice. And the wild rice stock was destroyed because the mill in our community controlled the dam. And whenever the mill needed to, it would raise the water levels and not open up the dam because the paper wasn't selling, so they didn't have to generate the power. It would flood out our wild rice stocks. And over time, destroyed much of what was there on the lake. But what ended up happening was the mill ended up closing down because resource-based economies are finite and they're not forever. Justin Trudeau. Is he listening? Probably not. But the mill closed down, and something amazing happened. Jana and her family began to go to the lake and make offerings for this rice. And it was a coincidence, I think, that around this time when they started making offerings to the lake, that they started to invoke the spirit of Mahnomen, of wild rice. And they were down there making offerings, and pretty soon the old man, who we now call our wild rice chief, goes out in the canoe, and slowly he starts to see these plants emerge from the lake. Amazing. And because for over 80 years the stock had been so low, that all of a sudden these plants start to emerge. And just through the invocation, through the ceremony, through the offering of tobacco to the water, this wild rice stock started to come back. And that is that relationality. That is that relationship to the land. That when you take care of it, it takes care of you. And that wild rice, that's a spiritual food for us. That is used for many things. And so for it to come back to our people, it certainly meant a lot. And how we use it in leadership and empowerment, this concept is for young people, what you put into life is what you get out. That's what the land teaches us, right? That you know the book, The Secret? You've heard it? It's the second best-selling book on the planet, The Secret, next to 50 Shades of Grey, which we're not going to talk about here. I've seen a few copies floating around the hotel, ladies. But that book, The Secret, is essentially this teaching, right? The whole secret in this book was what goes around comes around. If you put in some good comes back. It's like you jacked our teaching, you know? And that's essentially the concept, that if you put good things into your life, good things come back. And the universe, the land teaches us that. Because what does the land do? Like right now it's winter, it'll be spring, it'll be summer, it'll be fall. That's forever, hopefully. Climate change, I mean, I hope it's forever. But what follows that? What follows that cycle? All the plants, all the medicines, all the animals, the fish, the berries, the medicines we pick, everything follows that universal law. Everything follows that schedule. So why would we as two-legged people put ourselves above this understanding of the way the universe works and not apply it to our own lives? That if we go ahead and put forward good things, that these good things are returned to us. And so looking at how we work with young people in our programming this is the backbone of what we're trying to do. This is my little political spiel that I'll save because I don't want to sit here and preach to the choir, but this reconciliation thing that is happening, I barely heard that word this week, which is refreshing. But this reconciliation work that is happening right now in Canada, really has to center land. And I know up here, it's very, very different context than us to the south. But us to the south, where we're sitting on little pockets of reserves, where our land base is gone, this is what reconciliation is to me. We have a big unanswered question about the return of land to Indigenous people. The late, great Art Manuel wrote in his book, Unsettling Canada, he talked about how the government of Canada controls 99.8% of all land on these borders, leaving Indigenous people to control just 0.2% of the land in Canada. So we don't have to wonder too hard why we're poor, right? We don't have access to our territories. We don't have free and unencumbered access to the places where we used to live and used to stay. They'll burn down our cabins if we go to try to build something on the land because this is Crown land, not meant for us. We are only allowed to build and stay on our reserved property. So it becomes a real problem for us in the South, this question about reconciliation and land. And I'll finish here, and we have a couple of storytellers that through the week have approached me, and in my workshops I was trying to fill up this whole hour with stories from you guys, but none of you wanted to do it, and so I begged and cried my friend Scott, and he said, okay. And so Scott's going to come up and tell a story. Donald, I believe, is going to come up and share a story. And then we're going to open up the microphone to close and share some reflections. But to close my comments here, this is a group of young people that had just experienced a number of young people that had taken their lives in their community. And a handful of us were flown up there to help create some sort of stopgap, some sort of program to address the crisis that this community was in. And when we got up there, we met with the chief and council, and we were told that through various donations, they had received close to $300,000 in cash to put some sort of program in place to help create a movement to help these young people. And we knew that going in, but we were not allowed to tell the youth. So we worked with them through a period of 10 days to come up with some sort of solution to what was happening. And you can see the Post-it notes starting on the one wall. Those are sheets of paper. Those were sort of all of the things that they were feeling and experiencing. And by the end of our time, there was no wall space left. There was literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of paper on the walls, on the floors, of ideas of how to bring this community back to health and wellness and all of this through dozens of exercises and games and things that we did. And all of the ideas came from the young people. No adults were allowed to talk. But they had technicians and chief and council sitting in the room, and it was only youth, no adults talking at all. And so all of this work, they were surrounded by all of these ideas in this work. And over time, through the week, this plan started to emerge. And I went up there and then was trying to facilitate pulling together thousands of pieces of paper and sticky notes into a report. And I said, what we're going to do is we're going to use the 4 seasons as our model, and I'll put it in a medicine wheel, and the 4 seasons will be what is going to guide us and how we're going to program around the 4 seasons. And one kid put up his hand. He's like, "We don't have 4 seasons. We have 6 seasons, dummy." And I was like, "What?" And because the freeze up and the melt are very important to the north, and I'm from the south, and that's not my reality. So then I just shut up and listened to them because they're like, what the hell do I know? You know, so they took this 6-season model and they started to take sticky notes and pieces of paper off the wall and just put the activities they wanted to do within those 6 seasons, using the land as their model for how they wanted to program in their community. And we priced out all of the materials, and the materials were very basic things. If you can see this next slide, it says Winter Carnival, a youth gathering, TP teachings, Goose Camp. We had $300,000 that the chief and council were offering us, and I think in the final report, our budget was somewhere around 50. And the chief and council was like, well, you guys didn't do your job. What the hell is this? You give us half a plan. I said, no, this is the plan. These kids don't want to go to Canada's Wonderland. They don't want to go to West Edmonton Mall to ride a roller coaster. They want to go to Goose Camp. They just want to go to Goose Camp. When their uncles go, they'd like to go. And they would like to learn about why there are 13 poles to the teepee and why the door faces the east. And that's free information. You don't need a budget to do a teepee teaching. And this was the kids' plan. This wasn't us. This is what they said they wanted. And so by programming their ideas and with their goals in mind, this plan emerged, and it was all land-based. It was all simply land-based programming that they wanted. And it goes back to my opening comments about just remember that there are those that don't have access to this stuff the way we do, or the way some of the people you know do. There are kids that somehow, some way, get left behind. And it's difficult, but those are the ones we have to remember. Because this is all these kids were begging for. And unfortunately, what they really were asking for was a resource that none of us have enough of, and it's a resource that we can't buy, and that's time. Time. They wanted time with their mom and dad. They wanted time with their uncles and aunties. They wanted time with their elders. They wanted time with people that could show them something. And we get busy. We get wrapped up. Some of us are single parents. Some of us are working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Some of us are tired at the end of the day. But that resource that none of us can go to Walmart and buy is time. And time was the thing they were begging for the most. And I think that's a resource that can save lives, is giving our time and our energy to those young people. So I'm going to just go through all of this stuff. None of this is important. I mean, it's important. I mean, it is important, but. So to close and to introduce how we're going to end here this afternoon is I tried to put all of these ideas into one project, and it's been one slow-moving project through time. It started to emerge and show itself and what it could be, and it's called Stories from the Land. And what it is it's a land-based program for youth and elders and for community members at large to go out and to share stories. And you do all of the activities you want. You can build birch bark baskets. You can do any type of activity. But the end goal is to get elders and youth sitting across from each other talking. And sounds simple, but it's incredibly hard. Because youth don't think they have anything to offer, and elders often feel they don't have anything to offer, and the process is very tricky. But a few years ago, I was very fortunate to have come up here for the Côté Storytellers Festival at the Northern Arts Cultural Center here in Yellowknife. And I was partnered up with my friend Scott, who we got to go on tour. And I listened to Scott's stories, and Scott is going to come up here in a moment and share a story. But as I was listening to Scott, he was telling stories about dog sledding and his family and his uncles and his dad. He told an amazing story about one time they were lost out on the lake, and they had to tip their sleds, and they didn't trust the dogs, and they were kind of going a little crazy because it was so cold, and the storm rolled through, and they tipped their sleds, and they were frozen on the ice all night, and they woke up in the morning, and the sun was out, and it was clear, and they were 30 feet from the bush line. And if they'd have just listened to the dogs, they'd have had a fire and food. And I thought, wow, man, that's a cool story. But the way Scott framed it was a teaching. It was this really beautiful, profound teaching. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to steal Scott's job. No, I'm going to find a way to try to inspire young people the way Scott inspired me through storytelling. And then I started to kind of wrestle with the work I was doing in the digital media space and filmmaking and the other things I was doing. And I thought, well, maybe there's a way storytelling can intersect with technology, and we could make a game, or we could make an app and inspire young people to go outside with elders, but maybe they need a story that'll push them out the door and get their boots tied up tight so they go. And that has led from one thing to another, to another, to another. To where I am today with the project, and we have a business plan built around it, and some staff members that are now going to be hired on in the next 6 months or so. But it's all in an effort to inspire young people the way Scott inspired me. And we traveled across Canada this past fall on a national tour that was. We were granted a reconciliation grant through Canada Council for the Arts, and that was one of my biggest honors of my life. I come from a long line of residential school survivors. And figuring out a way to put together a national tour that highlighted indigenous stories and histories and knowledge, and to communicate our vision with communities was a major, major challenge. And we've had a number of partners. Jess Duncan brought us up north here to participate in a Stories from the Land process. Partners out in Ontario, in Saskatchewan. We've had these little test projects where we've found some best practice models. And one of the things that occurred to us right away on the tour was we had to find a way to make communities comfortable with us being there, because we're visitors. I can't just show up and turn a microphone on. I didn't turn my microphone on once. I'm a complete failure this week. I've talked to a lot of you, and I've heard you, but I didn't record in the tents. Because like you walk in the tent, and I'm like, hey, speak into this. What's your name? Where are you from? It's weird. So we're still trying to find a perfect model for this thing. But what was really challenging and really beautiful was finding a way communities wanted to engage with storytelling and technology. And some didn't, and some did. And what's really cool about this, framing it in the context of reconciliation, is that it forces our communities to come together. It forces our communities to come together in a way that they don't often. How often do we sit together as a community when it's not a bingo or a funeral? Right? Not very often. So when we come together for something good, man, it makes a big difference. And to be able to do that across Canada in many different communities in many different ways, every stop looked and sounded different. But what was apparent to me every time we left and packed up in a community was that getting young people and elders in the same room is the most revolutionary thing we can do today. It doesn't matter what color underwear the Prime Minister wears, whether it's red or blue or orange or green. It doesn't matter who the Grand Chief is. None of that matters. What matters at the end of the day is we are, through love and acts of kindness, rebuilding our communities from the ground up, using our own experiences, using our knowledge, using our ideas, inspiring young people to pick themselves up and do just a little bit better. And that's what this project is. That's what Indigenous storytelling does. Is it can change people's lives. It's changed my life. Scott changed my life. And so I hope and I wish that we could find a way to inspire young people and to hand them these gifts every single day, forever. And that's the type of project that I dream of, is young people being able to access their own histories, their own stories, their own knowledge base in a free and open way. And I've said this a couple times this week, there are more smartphones on the planet than there are people, which is gross and shocking. But if we're not putting our language, our stories, and our songs on smartphones for our young people to hear them, to at least inspire them to ask questions about, and to walk through these doorways, then I think we're failing. I think we're doing it wrong. It's okay to say, well, they should come to the lodge and sit and ask me themselves in person. Of course they should. But if they're not, we have to find a way to lead them to the lodge. And I think that's what our stories do. So Masi Cho, thank you very much for listening. And we're going to leave you hopefully inspired and happy. So I'm going to call on our two storytellers to come on up here, Donald and Scott. Big round of applause for our friends that are going to come up and share some stories.